Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to another IEEE USA Livestream webinar, 5 Resume Trends for 2023. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. This is the second in our 2023 Job Search webinar series presented by three-time best-selling author Elizabeth Lyons. For more information on the other webinars in the series, you can check them out through the link we'll be providing on the stream shortly. IEEE USA's goal is to create programming that is valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. As such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We value your opinions and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts. Elizabeth Lyons is a three-time best-selling author, with her latest book, Hear Us Roar, Unapologetic Woman Leading in Corporate America, making a big splash. She's also a coach, speaker, and consultant to the most powerful executives that keep corporate America rolling. Elizabeth's expertise is helping clients land a promotion, find a new job, or simply bring their leadership game to the next level. Elizabeth helps executives calm down and focus on what really matters, and together they end up with astonishing results. Without further ado, I will now pass it off to our presenter. Welcome back, Elizabeth. We're very excited for what you have for our audience today.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that. This is going to be a fun, definitely a fun presentation. Oh, Jonathan, we may have the wrong slides here. So let me do this. Let me pivot here. Let me grab my other slide deck up.
Folks, give us 1 minute. As you may all understand, there tend to be technical difficulties. No worries. We will resume in just a second.
So let's take this slide deck out. Hold on just a moment. Why don't we do this? Why don't I just share screen?
Yeah, why don't we do?
Share screen.
Yeah. So
That's
let's exit out of
easiest.
your previous one, Elizabeth, and then we'll just share your screen.
Okay. How's that? Okay. We're doing this on the fly. We can do this though. All right, just a moment. This is what we want to talk about. Okay.
Let's go to your full screen, Elizabeth. Perfect. All right, folks.
All right.
We'll resume our program.
All right, here we go. This is what we're going to talk about today. So we already talked about the economy and the overall job search. Today was really focused on resume trends, right? What's hot, what's not. We are going to touch on the economy again because overall, we definitely want to see the big picture here. It's more than just your resume, and we'll definitely talk about that as well. So we're going to look at the economic jobs for 2023, the recession piece again, what employers want, and the resume trends that we're showing overall. It's interesting too, because resume trends are a tiny bit different for tech and engineering versus some of the other skill sets. And I'll definitely share with what I'm reviewing like tens of thousands of resumes for the last 2 years and definitely the last year. And a lot of this you can find online, but I think the point of this is really showing you that some of those trends you're seeing online about resumes, I'm seeing it. So it's definitely a validation proof point. And this will help you to get resume ready if you're going to go out there in the job market this year and hopefully land something. So my name's Elizabeth Lyons. I am an author and a coach. I've worked with a lot of engineers over the years, over 20 years. Actually, I got my start coaching engineers, which is one of my favorite things in the world. I ended up moving into IT in the cyberspace almost a decade ago now. And so what makes me a little unique and qualified to be a coach is all of the years I've spent in talent acquisition, extending job offers to engineers, helping them with their resumes, helping them to be competitive, helping them with the interview process. And that's a little unique. You'll see a lot of career coaches out there. I have not honestly seen anybody else with my background. And then I wrote about it because I found that some people couldn't afford a coach, and engineers and IT people are generally very process minded, and really the job search is a process, and the resume is even a process. So I wrote the book so that anybody could really get a job and do it, make it very easy to walk through the process there. So here's the numbers, right? We're going to talk about the unemployment numbers again and the economy recap, because this does filter into your job search, whether you read it or not. I think when we're confidentially looking or we're laid off, it's very common to think about what's going on with us. And then we don't maybe do a SWOT analysis about what's happening out there in the economy. And when I started to write the presentations for the IEEE, what I thought was, how do we get here, right? How do we get in this market? Because it's very unusual. And in well over 20 years, I've never seen anything like this either. So I wanted to go back to fourth quarter of last year and pull some data and try to understand what's going on up to today. So back in November, we had an unemployment level of 3.7, and the jobs added were 263,000, which is, think about it. When you're doing a job search, a lot of people just stop applying to roles after Thanksgiving, frankly, and they just let it go until January 1st. There was still a ton of jobs added and very low unemployment. Now, here's the crux, right? When you look at those unemployment numbers out of the BLS, where are the jobs, right? Is that impacting us? Is it engineers? Is it IT people? Where is it? Well, it is in the segments of professional business services, transportation, hospitality, and warehouse. You're not going to see our kinds of jobs in warehouse necessarily, unless you're in like database area, but definitely in some a little bit in transportation. You're going to see some of that. Definitely in professional business services, you're going to see that in engineering. And then the other thing I look at is that Fed hike rate. The last presentation of the IEEE, I mentioned this and I said, the problem with this is the bonds, and that can be very dangerous if this trend continues. And here we are, like 30 days later, and we watched a bank go bad because they were tied to bonds and they didn't pay attention and the controls weren't upheld there, frankly. So I hate it when I say something and then it happens. So in December 2022, unemployment fell again. Think about that. December, added up, pile more jobs, again, healthcare and construction. You're going to see some IT and engineering jobs in that healthcare space. January 2023 dropped again, which is expected. They added 500,000 jobs, primarily in leisure and hospitality. People are going on vacation. People are definitely starting to move about. Now, right now, the unemployment rate, and I just had that up, 3.6 in February. So that's interesting. And there was a lot of discussion around the Fed hike rates and what was going to happen there. So the looming question for everybody, and I actually did a talk yesterday on this, was, what's going on in recession? Are we going to have one? Are we not? And it's still all over the board, although I am seeing some slowdown in the jobs posted, but what's there, they're definitely filling, they're definitely not cutting. Despite the headlines for the tech companies, the illusion is they're crashing and burning and they're laying off. But really, when you look at the data very carefully, they're right sizing. And it's not recession yet, and the indicators aren't there just yet. So overall, I would still say it's a good time to look. I might have a very different opinion and outlook in the fall. Again, I'm not an economist, but I'm very good at pulling the numbers and then also kind of looking at what I'm seeing on my desk in the hiring trends and what large corporations are doing. So talking with my peers or what have you, and trying to make sense of this data. So that's where this opinion is coming from. So my own opinion, I think there'll be a recession. When that hits, nobody knows. Even economists that have been around for many, many years actually can't predict it either. What I would say, though, is if you are looking, don't panic. There's certainly another opportunity coming around. Even if you're finding that the ads are a little slimmer than they were, say, 6 months ago or 8 months ago, there's still plenty of jobs open, and we still don't have this enormous plethora of candidates applying, frankly, where in recession we will, right? We're still not seeing it, So I would say, honestly, if you're looking, it's still okay. Employers' concerns in 2023, it's really about pay transparency, because they overhired or tried to overhire, and they definitely overcompensated during the pandemic. Right now, everybody's pulling back and saying, what does this position really cost to us? And so what you'll see in the offers, it'll feel different on your side, but what's driving it is simply this. Corporations are starting to ask that question, stop and look at their job architecture and look at their pay bands and really figure out, what's real, and also being fair, considering that there is inflation. Inflation is a very real thing for all of us, right? So they can't all of a sudden take a whole pile of money out of the job architecture or start with offers that maybe would have been acceptable 3 years ago. So they're trying to figure out, really what is that number? What is the skill worth, frankly? So what you're going to see on your end in the job offers is really more about, the full offer, what they have to offer, the compensation, the benefits, the perks. That's what you're going to start to see. They're definitely starting to do some retention, some spot bonuses. They want to keep their tenured employees. Believe it or not, there's still a pile of people that have stayed with the company despite the pandemic. They've been there 10, 15 years. They're not moving. Those people, they're going to start to recognize and hold and try to hold that talent while they're also in the middle of a transformation and rebuilding. Seeing a lot of that. 92% of employees plan to upskill. I can tell you in every interview that I've done for about the last 2 years, I always ask candidates, what is your driver? Why are you leaving your position? What is it for you? And the number one thing I hear in all my conversations is growth. I want career growth. I want career pathing. I want that certification. I want the company to help me with that. I want a master's. Will the company help me with that? And so companies are definitely listening to that and starting to look at internal programs and also additional dollars that they can give to engineer and IT people for certificates and things like that, which is phenomenal because for you, that's portable, right? You get the certification, you can get another job, you take that with you. Healthcare laws are definitely forcing companies to look at mental health benefits. They're definitely taking times and looking at those sorts of things. That's a big push. You kind of see it everywhere. If you look on LinkedIn or a lot of highlights, you're going to see a big push for that. Anything from personal time off to meditation classes to what have you. But the laws that are happening in our country are actually pushing and forcing that. But overall, what's going to be different when you get that interview and when you get those offers is the big focus is going to be on compensation and benefits is what we're seeing. Those are kind of the major concerns for employers. So definitely think about that and think about questions you want to ask in your interviews around those topics. Okay, so let's get into resumes. So what's hot, what's not, how do IT and engineers' resumes might be a little different than some of these trends as well. So overall, what's hot across the board is very easy to read formats. So let's back up and think about that. Who is ultimately getting your resume, right? You've got a couple of different people that you need to consider writing the resume for. So it could be a screener who just really screens you very peripherally and passes you to the recruiter. So that person has to be able to understand what you're doing. The recruiter needs to be able to understand the resume. The hiring manager needs to understand the resume. And what we are going to see in a future trend is AI is going to get built into our ATS systems, probably Workday first, right? And so when that happens, AI has to be able to read it too. So very easy to read formats. There shouldn't be longer than 2 pages of your resume. I was reading this morning, any kind of pretty font, fancy fonts, things that are imported in, pictures, logos, any of that will eventually trip up the ATS system. They won't be able to read it. So you don't want that happening to you. So some of the, I don't know that any of you would put any of those graphics on there because you are IT and engineering, but don't do it because that could be a problem long term. We're not seeing, I will tell you right now, we are not seeing AI built into any of the ATSs at all. So it's not like that AI is grabbing you, screening you, and putting you in a bucket on the back end of the ATS, which I would read. That's not what's happening now. Will that happen in the future? Yeah, it could. It could happen. And they're starting to look at some trends around that. And they're being very careful with some of this because of diversity, frankly. And we don't want AI to start pulling in or weeding out. And so there's a whole bunch of talk around that. Bottom line, easy to read formats, easy to read font, no more than 2 pages. Really, you don't really have more to say to me other than 2 pages. We're not going to read it anyway. Simple, very simple. think about the person that's going to read your resume or be that screener. I mean, that generation likely is a younger generation, and they think in terms of, Instagram. They think in terms of Twitter, 140 characters. You want to think in those terms and keep it really simple. Another key thing that I said to all of my clients, and I just spent this morning at 5 a.m. rewriting somebody's resume, and I had to rewrite the resume because it wasn't who, what, when, why, where. So your first section of that summary, that's all the reader is trying to understand. Who are you? How long have you been doing it? What are you doing? What industry are you doing in it? What's the skill set? And then the eye would bounce down to like maybe a skills section, which I think is important to have there at the top. And then you're going to roll into the experience. So if you can't understand those 5 things in the first paragraph in your resume, and you're not getting phone calls to interview, you've got a problem, and you probably need to look at a coach or look at somebody that will help you to rewrite it. I would honestly say that in this market, if you're not getting calls, you've got a resume problem for sure. What's not hot? Lots of words on the resume, small text, 0.8, 0.9, too small. Cover letters. Honestly, I haven't even seen one attached in 2 years. I just don't even see them anymore. So there's no real reason for that. You should be able to capture everything actually on that resume. Very long list of career progression. No one cares. That was a real standout in the trends. They really want to see accomplishment statements along with the skill sets, but they don't want 15 bullets under one entry under one company. Short, sweet, accomplishment driven, etc. I'll add this commentary to you as well, to let you know that not just a coach, but I had been in my own job search, not once, but twice. And I would literally think about the reader, and I would write things on my resume like what I did, because that made very clear what I'm proud of, right? These were my accomplishments, things that were standout, things that were not a part of my job that I did and I contributed that I was proud of. So don't put anything on there that you're not proud of because you don't want to talk about it. I got that coaching many years ago and it served me well. So that's where you want to be overall with your resume. These are things that you want to consider getting on the resume that's going to really bring you into the yes pile very quick and out of the maybe pile if you're a candidate. So did you drive any growth, right? The big thing during the pandemic was, there was demand, there was a lot of growth, and there wasn't a lot of people to do the work. So some companies are going through transformation. They're on the back end of that growth. Maybe they've done some right sizing. So how did you help your company during the growth period of the pandemic? What was your function? What was unique there? Did you retain people? Were you a leader in any way? Were you a team lead? Were you a manager, director, vice president? If you led people, what did you do for retaining? That's a hot topic. That's still something that companies are still considering and looking at. Although you don't read it in the news as much, about people leaving their jobs in this huge exodus, companies are still looking and rebuilding. So thinking be somebody that helps rebuild whatever they need in terms of infrastructure. If you led, how did you keep people from fleeing your team? What were your retention numbers? How did you do it? And call that out in the resume in some manner. And then did you work in any kind of the hot skill sets, or were you even on a team that collaborated with or supported or anything like that when it comes to AI, big data, security? You definitely want to add something about that on your resume. These are the things that are going to make your resume stand out. And then it reminds you to also bring that up in the interviews as well. So overall, that's what I would say. And I want to end with another point here during the summary. When you write that resume, you're writing to 4 audiences. One is that ATS, so you don't want anything in there that's going to trip it up and have the document not go over properly. One is it could be a screener, it could be a recruiter, and it's definitely gets on the desk of the hiring manager. So as you're writing that, make sure that you're speaking to all of those audiences. And then I think you've got a pretty good chance at the call and the first interview and second and hopefully final. So in summary, overall, I would still say it's still a good year to find a job. You might be more passive in your search, right? But I still think it's okay and it's safe to make a move right now. Talking in March, I don't know what I would say in October. If you ask me, I might alter that. Increases overall, you're not going to see them be as great as they were, say, a year or two ago, because again, companies are looking at trying to pay a little bit more fairly and factor in inflation and so forth. So, are you going to make a job change and make a $50,000 increase like 2 years ago? No, I don't see that. I don't see it in the offers that I extend every day. So, but could you make some increase? Maybe. Could you get a lateral because you got that huge increase 2 years or a year ago? Yeah, you'd probably get that lateral. So anyway, that's something to think about as you're out there looking, so that you can come in the comp spread fair when you're talking about, offers and where you want to be with the recruiter. Recession's still on the table for 2023. That doesn't seem to be going away. Last I read a week ago, I mean, you could read this every day, but I read a week ago, they're talking about fall of this year. But really the jury's still out around all of that. But companies are definitely looking for certain skills and traits. So you want to be creative in that resume and really pull them into what you have to offer. And then I wanted to leave you with some tools here. So I'm sure everybody on the call has heard of ChatGPT, but that can help you sometimes with interview questions that you might receive. Might be good to look at. I would still do a regular Google search at first on interview questions and then a deep dive. And then you can always read my book, I Quit, Working for You Isn't Working for Me. That'll also tell you some interview questions as well. But ChatGPT, I would add it like it's an add-on to maybe your research. I wouldn't maybe lead with there, but I think it might have some good stuff, maybe worth checking out. LinkedIn Career Explorer has a place for you now. That's a new function and feature. And then there's another little piece called Rewordify. And this is a very cool tool that enables you to take the job posting and post it in there, put your resume in the other screen, hit enter, and it'll tell you the most relevant keywords that need to be on your resume, but also probably how likely you are to get that call to interview. So that would be another one you can do before you apply, just to kind of run it through that tool and see how close you would be before you do it. The other thing I would want to leave you with is keep it simple, like really dummy it down. I looked at one resume a couple of weeks ago and the person was really irate that they weren't getting calls. And then when I read the resume, it was so obvious to me why they weren't getting calls. They didn't take in any consideration the qualifications of the jobs that they were looking at. So, when you read a job posting, we get all caught up in the words and this and that. And as we're reading it, we're thinking, well, I can do that. I can do that. And, the irony is that really it's the qualification. So as simple and maybe stupid as that sounds, go down to the qualifications and make sure that you have those very clearly stated on the resume, because that's what's going to get you the call for the job. It's always been like that, but it's really like that now because the qualifications by the eyes of the American employment law are what have to be there. The minimum qualifications have to be there for you to be invited into the applicant. Minimum qualifications. Now, here's the other thing. If the minimum qualifications are 5 years and you're a 20-year veteran, you probably shouldn't be applying to that job because it's not even going to match from your compensation standpoint, let alone your skill standpoint. So look at those and really figure out who you are, where you are, and make sure that that's cleanly stated on the resume. The next section will say desired. And if you have those, again, make sure those are up in your skills section. Make sure that they're maybe even sprinkled or peppered through that resume a couple of times to really get that reader's attention. So it sounds like the simplest thing, but that is really what gets people more calls than not, and just a very simple document. And the trends are showing that, mostly because people don't have the attention span anymore, frankly. So anyway, this is all just food for thought as you're putting your resumes out there and considering your job searches. And then this is a picture of my book, I Quit Working for You Isn't Working for Me. It's done very well the last 2 years, I can tell you that. And you're more than welcome to reach out to me. For the IEEE, I always offer a 15-minute coaching session, always. I've been with this group like 20 years or something. So I think the world of the members and the leaders of the IEEE and all the spinoffs within the IEEE, so Women in Engineering and some of the other groups. So I'm more than happy if you're just like, hey, I'm not getting calls, would you review my resume? I've got a couple questions about the job search. It's confusing. I'm more than happy to answer them for you. Just reach out to me in email or on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, say that you saw this presentation, and then I'll try to fit in calls next week for any of you that are interested. And then my site is lionsology.com. So you'll see my books on there. You'll see my coaching work on there. And I actually won an award for coaching in 2020, actually. So anyway, you're welcome to any or all of that I have to offer. And just please know that I wish you well and that I hope that your search is good and fruitful and that it all works out, because usually it does. So that's all that I had for today. Jonathan, do we have any questions in the chat or anything that I can answer for anybody?
Yes, we do. And folks, I've also included Elizabeth's contact information on the screen. Sorry, it looks like that.
No, it's great. Thank you.
So yeah, so Elizabeth, before we move on to the audience questions, I do have a couple that I would like to ask you. And folks, because we are now on the Q&A section of the segment of the webinar, please post your comments and questions in the comments and live chat section, and we'll get to them as soon as we can. So Elizabeth, my first question. You talked very extensively about like trends, pop, and tips for writing your resume. What are I've heard the term in the career kind of landscape about resume keywords. Have you heard of them? Should we use them?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they're helpful. I think that there's two things. There's skills and there's competencies, and they're a little different. Skills are skill sets. So let me back way up. Like all of you understand root cause analysis. All of you understand that. So whenever I talk these concepts, I like to back up and go, well, where did they come from? So they come from job architecture. So let's say you're an engineer, right? There's job architecture. There are 3 to 5 main skills and some competencies that you would have in order to qualify for that position. And that's what's really got to be on the resume. So skills, again, are a little bit different than competency. So skills could be very specific, like .NET, Java, what have you. Competencies could be really more like leadership, communication, collaboration, internal client focused. Those are competencies, or they're different. And companies typically are now interviewing with a mix of both, frankly. So both should be on the resume, but you can't go wrong if you go back to, it always goes back to job architecture. So for your skill set, are the main skills very clearly on there showing improving your qualifications? That's going to get you the call.
Gotcha. Thank you. My next question. So what should I write, or what should I do if I don't have any experience in the job field I'm applying for? Let's say I'm applying for a completely different industry or, type of career than I originally had. Any tips on that?
Yeah, there's something that I've seen recently where I would even say the last year, the big companies, if you read those qualifications carefully, sometimes they say you would qualify if you have education. So they'll say hands-on experience, education, military experience. Oh, okay. Well, then you would qualify to that position. Or if you're coming out of the military, you might have military skills that we in corporate America, we would read a resume and not see it, frankly, just not see the connection, but you have the skill and it's in there. Maybe it's used in like a different jargon or language than what we would call it in corporate America, but the skill is there. And so I would say go back to the qualifications. And if you're pivoting and you're moving into that other area, I mean, expect a slog, expect a journey. You'll have to have your education and your certificates, and, you're really looking for somebody to take a chance on you. and you're coming up against other candidates that have been doing it a while. I mean, it can be done, but expect a long job search.
Hmm. Awesome, thank you. So now we will move on to the audience questions. Our first question from our audience member. Although the government is posting net jobs, I understand there's an even larger number of losses in the 55 and over professional group, age 55 and over. Can you address demographic shifts that you see?
Yeah, I came across one. I want to add to this thought that you have here. Uh, it literally talked about, it was a statistics around men that are just leaving the workplace, and there was a huge delta, and it wasn't just 55, it was men in general that just were just completely opting out and not working. And the question was, where have they gone? What's going on there? So I'm not really sure what the answer is there, but there is some data out there about that. And we definitely saw it in the blue collar fields in particular. So it's hard to say, did the pandemic make people wake up and say, hey, wait a minute, I don't want to do this anymore? Or, we can do more on one income because I don't want to do this anymore. I don't know what's going on there, but I think you're onto something. And I don't think all of the data is really out on that either, but it was not just 55 and older. It was men, which was kind of shocking to me to read.
Mhm. And I feel like in this day and age, like especially with the recent pandemic and everything, I think a lot more people are trying to focus on mental health above anything. So, I feel like there are a lot of career shifts or even,
Yeah.
uh,
You
job
can
people quitting jobs.
yeah, you can, that's another thing I would add here is, if you're making a job change, it's okay. Where 3 years ago it was a big tap dance about why are you leaving and all, not anymore. I mean, you can take a step down. Like I did. I was a senior manager with 21 people in 4 countries, and I went back to an individual contributor role. And my story was fine out there when I interviewed. I was very clear, like I'm leaving exceeds many. It's gonna hurt them when I leave, but I don't want to do this. I want my life. And that was okay. It was okay to say that. And I got plenty of interviews. So I think that's the other piece is, whatever reasons you're looking, it's very forgiven now. People are just people now in the interview process. And so you don't need to worry about that too much anymore.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. And thanks for our audience member for the question. This next one, so our audience member asks thoughts on employers offshoring roles to Bulgaria, companies interviewing just to keep a record of someone to be ready to replace their current employee in case they suddenly leave. And I think the following question that our audience member asks is kind of similar. So I think the main theme is, do you have any thoughts about a lot of U.S. companies kind of like offsourcing their or outsourcing their jobs to people outside the U.S.? I think
Yeah,
that's a pretty big
they're
topic.
they're not. In fact, they're cutting the H-1Bs in record amounts here. That's been like, so you're on an H-1B and they just lay you off and you go back to India or Afghanistan. You don't have to Google very far to see that. They're not offshoring. The first cuts in Apple, Meta, Google, the big houses, Amazon, the first cuts in, and they actually did a big slice in H-1B, which we just haven't seen in our country. So they're pulling everything back this way. I have dear friends in India that worked here that are out of work in India. And so they're trying to, apply to American companies and not having any success because they're not pushing it that way anymore. And in fact, they're making cuts that way, especially in software engineering. You're seeing a lot of it there. With AI and what's happening, if AI can write code, there's not going to be needs for those jobs. There's a lot of jobs that will either morph and change or get phased out. And in terms of Bulgaria, I have not even heard of that as an identified country for offshoring. So I don't know anything about that, and I haven't read anything to that effect either.
Yeah, I can imagine there's probably a It's a hot topic. So, I'm sure there are companies that have been outsourcing and, that's been an issue in the past. So, it's really appreciate the insight. And thank you to our audience member for the question. This next question from our audience member, Priya. Priya asks, the slide mentions, and I think this is in regards to your
Yeah.
resume trend, what's hot
Yeah.
and what's slide, not to mention long list of career progression. What does long mean? I think you kind of answered that, like don't make a long list.
Yeah, 10 years is typical. And especially if you're in IT engineering, especially if you're in security, AI, big data, any of that. I mean, your technology and the skills are older anyway. They, when I went out there, I cut it at 10 years as well. And I was concerned about that. And frankly, that gets the call. What happens is people that are writing their resume want to write every single thing thinking that's going to get them the call, or they save it for the conversation, right? Save it for the actual interview. You can say, hey, you don't see it on my resume, but prior to that, this is what I did, or this is that piece. From a technology perspective, that stuff tends to be current. Otherwise, if you go back further than that, it's not even going to be relevant. So I think that there's always, especially in engineering and IT, there's always this angst about, well, I don't want to cut it off because there might be something there. Well, I would go back to the job seeker again and say, do you really want to have that on there? Because if you're applying to a job where that technology is old or that experience is old, does that make sense?
Mhm.
Industries don't matter anymore either. So I have clients that say, well, I worked in defense, but it's been 20 years. You'd be amazed. You've got more opportunity now to pivot and switch industries than you will ever have for the rest of your career. So for instance, like I'm in huge banking and financial, and prior to that, I was in fintech. Unless you were in our industry and your resume was submitted, we really didn't even call you. We wanted somebody from the industry. Now, they will talk to somebody from healthcare. They will talk to somebody from other industries. And because if the skill set is there, that's okay. So I think that's the other thing is people want to go back 10 and 20 years or, beyond 10 years because they've got something to say or they worked for that huge company way back when. But it's not going to matter. It's not going to be relevant, and
Mhm.
they're not going to, you're just writing more. What they want is less. You've got to find the sharp, snappy words, that are going to grab the attention to get the call rather than
Mhm.
just more words, which is very difficult for the engineer. I understand because you're very detail oriented, but it's not going to help you. I don't know that it's going to hurt you, but it's definitely not going to help you. And it
For sure.
tips to your age. There's another great reason why not to do it. It tips to your age. So, I think that, I mean, and you read the trends. I mean, it's very clear. Don't go back too long. Don't have more than 2 pages.
Mhm. For sure, thank you. And I think that also kind of helps answer along with your answer from my earlier question about career transitions. Our audience member Regina asks, Miss Lyons, what about career transitions? I would like to transition out of higher education and into tech. I think a lot of the tips that you provided definitely help answer that question. Definitely making it relevant to that industry. So we'll move on to the next question. But thank you for sending in your question, Regina. This next question, I see on LinkedIn that even entry-level jobs asking for 5 to 8 years experience. Can I still apply with no experience because it is under entry level?
Oh, that's such a nightmare. I'm so sorry you're having that experience because clearly that is the stupidest ad ever posted out there. So what I will tell you is this. For your level of experience, there's two ways to do this. In the ads, in the title, in the ad, there's another thing they'll say is they'll say intern, they'll say early career, which very well could be you. It can be 0 to 3 years is early career, or it could be entry level. So those are the three titles that you would want to search on. And I would wonder if when they talk about entry level jobs and 5 years experience, if they're really talking about maybe 4 years and a master's or what have you. It'd be interesting to read the qualifications from a legal perspective and see if what they posted makes sense and is legal, or it's just like a terrible thing out there that shouldn't be out there. So I'll leave you with that. Try those 3 titles though, and apply to anything like that, and that's going to be for you.
Yeah, it also probably wouldn't be hard to imagine that this is probably one of those jobs that is relevant to the meme where have you ever seen the meme where we're
Yeah,
looking for entry level 30-year-old 20
I've seen it.
20-year-old with 30 years of experience.
Yeah, I've
That's
seen it. It's terrible. I mean, and
it,
that's why I led with, I'm really sorry you're having this experience because it's
yeah,
terrible.
it's out there, which is funny and also kind of mortifying at the same time.
Yes.
For
And
sure.
discouraging.
For
Yeah.
sure,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you for your question. This next question, help. How does one break out of academia? So I'm guessing if
Great.
assuming the person has been in academia as a
Yeah.
career.
Great question. Same question I've gotten 20 years in every IEEE talk I've ever given. It's difficult. It's just difficult because it doesn't translate. So, I mean, I've got a nonprofit client right now, and she's not trying to get into corporate America, but it doesn't translate, and so that's the problem. I mean, I think your best bet there is maybe some networking. I think I get to be very honest with you, it's going to be a long uphill slog, but it can be done. I've seen it done. It's the ones that hang in there and just keep slogging it out and keep applying that get that opportunity. And I would say, now is a good time than ever. It probably won't be a better time than now because companies are a little bit more forgiving in that.
Hmm, for sure, thank you. Oh, and this next question actually is, I guess, the opposite. Diana asks, how does one break into academia? Any tips?
um, that's a great question. I don't know that I know the answer to that perfectly. I'm just going to give you basic, skill set stuff. I think show the skill sets, right? Go back to those qualifications, show the skill sets. Definitely see if you can network into some of those opportunities. It's kind of like, I would really like to work for the city and get a city job. How could I get in there, right? And those are all, you don't understand, like, what do I need to do to get some of these jobs? So I think it's the same sort of thing. I think some of it is just getting visibility, not the, hey, help me get me hired, but getting visibility in the resume. So getting to know somebody in those schools or in those segments and just saying, hey, how can I ask them? They'll know how do I get my resume noticed and just read, without getting the decline.
Sure. Thank you, Elizabeth. And actually, I do see some comments in our live chat going or chat function going on with our other audience members giving their tips. So really appreciate the discussion. Thank you all. This next question, any tips on how to put together a CV for academics with scientific publications and so forth?
When I saw, now not for academia, but because I'm a corporate America person, I'm not an academia. I don't know that space.
Hmm.
That's not my expertise. But when I have seen those resumes, all of the scientific publications are at the bottom. They're listed out down the bottom in big detail, any presentations they've done and so forth. So that's how I've seen them. But you could probably look online and just look at academia resumes and just get an idea of the formatting and go from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Elizabeth. Oh, and actually, kind of going off of the previous, how do you break into academics question? We do have one feedback by being really bad at writing resumes but good at getting grants.
It's
That's
hard. Yeah. I've
that's a
known of clients that were great at writing the grants, but not at the resumes. It's almost like learning a different language. I mean,
mm,
it's truly like, when you're writing for something like that, that's, the
it.
reason I've been really successful with clients and the resumes is because I'm sitting with managers, directors, and vice presidents every day, all day long, right? I know what they're thinking. I know what they're looking for on paper. Then as a recruiter, I'm vetting the candidate pool based off the qualifications, but also making sure that those resumes are clearly stated in that way. So I already know the language they're speaking, so it's easier for
Mhm.
me. But I think ultimately, keep it simple, you might be overthinking it, and go back to those qualifications, go back to the 5 skill sets that particular title would have, and make sure those are on the resume. Because I bet in a grant writing, you're very, very, very detailed. And in the resume, it may not translate to your skill set. Do you know what I mean? So you can't get that skill set overnight. So what would you do? Keep it really simple. Don't overthink it, and go back to the ad and those titles. Pull 5 ads. You'll see in the qualifications of 5 ads, there's a cadence, there's a pattern, there's a trend in what they're looking for. That's what you need on that resume.
Great insight. Thank you. This next question. What is the best practice on post-interview follow-up for a job that I'm interested in?
That's a good question. So post-interview, yeah. So here's what I've done and coached for years. And then again, I remember I had my own job search that I've gone through. At the end of every interview, I ask them their timing, and I ask them how would they like to be approached. Like, and I ask permission, like, we're talking here on Thursday. Would it be okay with you if I check in next Tuesday in email and just see where you're at with the job? And so that works really well, like asking permission, being sensitive to their timing, but you getting an answer. You can also say things like, hey, I'm interviewing other places. I don't want to drive you crazy, but could you just give me an update on my application? Would you just tell me if I'm even still being considered? In other words, don't hold me in the applicant pool. Let me know if I'm moving forward or not, so I can manage the other opportunities that are coming in. And that's okay to say that even in email as well.
And for our audience member Albert, and for anyone else who was interested, Elizabeth did host her previous webinar, the first one in our job search in 2023 series on securing the right job. So be sure to check that out, as well as the other ones in the series. I will post that in the comment section shortly. Thanks for the question. This next question, our audience member Leon asks, I understand that HR and screeners don't read cover letters, but what about hiring managers?
No. And they're not going to see them anyway, because I mean, it's not what I think. It's a fact. In 3 years, 2 years solid of reading tens of thousands of resumes, nobody's attaching those. So I'd have to ask you, why is this so important to you? What is so critically important on your cover letter that you have this big need to say that isn't on the resume? Because it's the resume. And frankly, any of that, it's just, you can say it in the interview. The idea is to get it on the resume. So for example, if you're a green card holder or a US citizen, you probably want to have that on the resume. If you're an H-1B candidate, you probably want to have that on the resume. You don't need to write that on a cover letter. If you're willing to relocate and you know that position posted is 2 to 3 days in the office, you could write that on the resume at the top. We'll relocate, or whatever it is. I mean, unless your cover letter is like, you're trying to explain job changes, you're trying to, that all that is done in an interview. No one is putting any kind of a cover letter attached to a resume anymore. I mean, nobody. I mean, I look at hundreds of jobs I filled when I was back at the first company that I was with 11 years. I filled over 100 positions. So if you figure 101 position alone, there's a minimum of 25 to 50 candidates. And I reviewed all of that. No one puts that in there. So I have to ask you, why is this so important to you?
Gotcha. So actually we do have a kind of question based off of that from one of our audience members. What about employment gaps? I explained them in the cover letter. Since with that being said, that hiring managers don't look at cover letters, is there anywhere else you can explain that?
Yeah, again, it goes on the resume. So I have a client right now that hasn't. There's a line in volunteer work where it says sabbatical.
I'm sorry, real quick.
If you were on a contract, like go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I think we were just losing you for a second. Your audio was cutting out, but I think we got you back. So sorry for the interruption.
No, that's okay. So the other thing that you can cover on the resume would be, if you're a contractor, like you're showing very short gaps, right? You can write things in parentheses like project completed, or layoff, or moved, relocated. You can say things like that. Again, it's covered on the resume if you're worried about it. But again, the market is really forgiving. The things that we worried about for years and talked about at the IEEE with resumes and interviews, we're not, the market is very forgiving, and not to worry about that. And again, you can cover that on the resume as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. And so I think this next question, I think we kind of covered this. It's also a cover letter um, on as being a part of the what's not hot trend list. So I think we already answered that. But thank you for sending in your question. This next question, V asks, since you say that job listings are no longer important, who cares? Is it okay to leave off the listings of jobs that are over 10 years old? Won't that seem like you're hiding something?
No, and I covered that earlier. It may not be relevant.
Hmm.
There's a lot of angst about, I got to get everything on the resume. It may not be relevant. So, but I can tell you that the resumes in general, unless you've got really short gaps there, like you're you've got jobs that are like 2 years, 2 years, 3 years, 2 years, and then you want to go back beyond that 10 years. It's not in technology, it may not even be relevant.
Hmm. Awesome. Thank you for the question. Um, this next question, but I see questionnaires, especially on LinkedIn jobs, that ask how many years experience do you have in our industry? So I think this is revolving off the question regarding like, can you apply for a job that you don't have enough years of experience for?
Yeah.
So I guess, what do you have any tips on answering those? I mean, I would imagine you'd have to answer truthfully and
Yeah,
whatnot.
I think, I mean, they may ask that, but across the board, it's not a hard stop. I would still encourage you to apply for sure.
Hmm, for sure. Thank you. This next question, Glenn asks, how important is it to match skills listed on a LinkedIn job posting? It does not seem possible to hit the majority of skills as words subjective by poster, even though the skills are present. So I guess the main question is, how important is it to match the skills for a job that you don't necessarily have the skills for?
Um, I mean, you're trying to get it as close as possible. It doesn't seem possible to hit the majority of the skills as were subjected by the poster. I mean, take the top ones. I mean, if they're starting to get into postings like communication and this, that's soft skill. I mean, I would go with the regular hardcore skills, right?
Mm,
Like if it's project manager, the project management skills or the software skills are really important to have on there. And LinkedIn postings can be a little bit tough, Glenn. So I understand your question. Sometimes it's not copied and pasted or directly connecting to the ATS where the posting resides. So I can understand the confusion and frustration there.
awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. Um, this next question, I think, so audience member is asking for, please send documentation of latest trends in resume designs. How often does the resume designs change? So I'm not sure if we have any documentation, but I'm sure there are plenty of articles online that
Yeah,
go over
I
that.
can actually send you. I mean, I didn't include in the presentation, but it was all researched. And then the proof point, frankly, is me.
Mm,
I mean, it's not regurgitated off an article I read out of Fast Company. I would be your proof point going, yep, this is what we're seeing. And the resume trends do change about every year or two. I mean, with AI, don't you think the resume trends will change next year? With Workday flooding the market. Did you know Workday had an ad in the Super Bowl? Did you know that they have a NASCAR car? I mean, every ATS is going to Workday. So they're going to be building and beefing it up. So yeah, you bet those resume trends, especially with what's on the horizon, are going to change yearly for sure.
absolutely. And folks, with that being said, we have, of course, provided Elizabeth's contact information on the stream as well. So be sure to reach out to her for a consultation. Along with being presenter of these webinars, she is, of course, a career coach and will be able to help you much more easily by reaching out to her directly as well. So thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you for our audience member for the questions. Um, this next question, do PhD graduates stand a chance in industry in the US, or are they now limited to only academic opportunities?
I don't know I don't know about academic opportunities, so I can't. That's not my space.
Hmm.
I'm a corporate America person. However, what I will tell you is, if you're a PhD graduate and you're on an F1, it's an enormous obstacle. All right, now It's really tough. I mean, they're cutting the H-1Bs and sending them back to their countries. And there's droves of articles out there about that. India is grossly aware of this as well, and very concerned about it. So what I would say is very difficult if you're a PhD candidate or a master's candidate and you're on that student visa. That's going to be really hard.
Awesome. Thank you, Elizabeth. This next question from Diana, and we will take a few more questions before the end of the hour ends. Diana asks, there's a trend promoted by Human Workplace slash Liz Ryan to write resume like a first person story instead of bullet points. Any thoughts on that?
I didn't read. I like Liz Ryan. I think she's great. Her and I came up at the same time together, amazingly enough. I haven't read that article, so I couldn't comment on it. But I mean, in general, this is just a generalization. And again, I don't know what she's referring to. We don't care to read them in first person. They read very arrogant. Frankly, like I've read, LinkedIn even profiles like Mr. So-and-so has, it's weird. Like it's very weird, So, and again, that trending is to keep it short and sweet. Now you're talking about a story, and a story could be, I don't know, 700 words. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
It feels like a bait and switch. Like, oh, don't look here, but look here. I wouldn't do that. I mean, I would just stick to the format, make sure that it matches the qualifications. And, there's a lot of agonizing on this call and almost argumentative about it. And, that's just going to make it harder on you. You know what I mean? So, I mean, that's what I would truly say to that. I don't know that I would write a whole story, because now we're back to like cover letters, and I don't want your story. I got less than 30 seconds to review and figure out if you're qualified or not. Any recruiter out there will tell you, but you agonize hours in writing. We review in 30 to 60 seconds. Any recruiter will tell you that. So you got to get in and get out. And I don't really want your story. I want to know if you're qualified
Right.
by law.
I definitely agree with that. I think most people already dread seeing that there's a paragraph on the screen. I don't think with the short time that hiring managers have that they'll want to even read a single paragraph. So that may.
And again, I don't want to slam Liz Ryan, because she's got some great stuff out there, and I don't know what you're referring to. So I want to end with that. But because I don't know. I'd have to like see her example and be like, yeah, that might work, because it's so unique. But in general, and the problem is you're all so detailed, and you've all been compensated and gone into professions where detailed is needed. And this is now a new game where it's not about detail. It's becoming less words, punchy words, and AI is on the horizon. And it's might be painful, but the evolution, it needs to be there or you'll be left behind. So it's tough. It's really tough.
For sure. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, Diana, for the question. So we'll end it off the Q&A with this last question from David. David asks, what are your thoughts on putting a more extensive history of employment and explaining gaps on LinkedIn as an extension of your resume?
Hey, David, I recognize your name, and I think you've even followed me for years. So nice to see you here. I don't like a lot on LinkedIn, because you know what? They can judge you. It can be very, oh, I'll call him or her. Oh, I won't. And so I wouldn't put a lot on LinkedIn. I would just keep it kind of short and sweet, or keep it to one word if you want to, like contract completed, or, company closed down, position eliminated. Those words are fine if you really feel the need to explain it on LinkedIn. But I would be a little bit careful what you say on there. I would rather have that on the resume. But if you feel like it just looks terrible and there's short gaps, I would explain it like literally within 2 words, like, laid off, position eliminated, contract completed, things like that. And then the reader will understand that, it wasn't necessarily your fault or your choice. And many years ago in my own career, I had a resume that looked just like that for years. And so I really understand that mentally and emotionally, and how do you present that in a way that's professional, and that still makes you a desirable candidate. So I definitely understand that.
Gotcha. Thank you for the insight. And I guess one quick question off of that: should you include your LinkedIn on your resume? The link to your LinkedIn on your resume?
Sure, you can. It's optional. You can. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with that. It's totally up to you. Totally up to you.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Well, folks, unfortunately, we are out of time. I know this is again, job search and tips especially are hot topics. So, we really appreciate you all tuning in. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us today and for providing our audience your insight on the best resume trends to take their career journeys to the next level. We really appreciate having you with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. And hopefully we'll see you next month for the cake topper of our webinar series.
Absolutely. And folks, I will be posting the, please give me 1 second. Um, And for our audience members, thank you for tuning in for your great questions. Next and final webinar in the 2023 Job Search Series will be on Wednesday, April 19th at 12 p.m. Eastern or 11 a.m. Central. The registration link has been provided below, and I will be putting it in the comment section as well. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe on our channels on social media, and check back daily for future live stream updates. Have a great day, everyone.